We're taught that there's only one religion that's eternal in the past and eternal in the future. And while man may have not been on this planet eternally, there is a religion throughout this universe that is eternal. And it was brought from God to man by an intermediary every time. Now that intermediary had different names, that's true. And man had different requirements when they came. They weren't the same people in the same cultures every time. So we have Moses coming to the Jewish people who were slaves and saying, be free. This is what freedom's about. Take personal responsibility for yourself. Follow some rules and make yourself a nation. Christ comes and he says, you've got too many rules. Okay? Because times changed. It was not the same at the coming of Christ as it was at the day of Moses. The conditions changed. And it was necessary for God to bring, as it were, as a school. That would be an example. In first grade, you learn some things. You learn some foundational things. In the second grade, you don't give up what you learn, but you add to it, and you learn there may be exceptions here and there. And by the 7th and 8th grade, you understand what some of those exceptions are to some of those rules you're learning in school. Each of the teachers that you had knew the same amount of knowledge about each of those subjects, but they gave you the information you needed for the time in which you had that understanding. And as your understanding developed, so did their message to you. And it's the same way with the prophets. We believe that God manifests his attributes through his prophets so that we can begin to understand and know and worship and love God. You can't love something you can't understand. You can't love something that is unknowable. God, wishing to make himself known to man, did so through his prophets, by manifesting in his prophets his attributes most perfectly. Okay? So, in the day of Moses, maybe the attribute of obedience, or the attribute of law. In the day of Christ, the attribute of mercy and forgiveness. In the day of Muhammad, the attribute of justice was more fully revealed, and the attribute of brotherhood. All these prophets came and delivered basically the same message for different people at different cultures and at different levels. So it doesn't look always the same, but one thing you can be sure of, none of the prophets ever taught a person to steal. That's okay, steal, yeah, great thing. They didn't teach you to lie. They didn't teach you to do a lot of things that were negative and hurtful to other people. They taught, every one of them taught the golden rule, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. To do unto others as you would have them do to you. Okay? The spiritual teachings of all the prophets are the same. That's what we mean by the oneness of religion. Those things doing with the spirit of each of us, the same teachings in every religion, except for a few that are born of human perversity, and I won't go into those, but there are some out there.
He's from Salt Lake City.
I wouldn't go that far. But you know, I mean, if you so they all come from God. God reveals them through different teachers to different people. None of these teachers, we believe, is to be exalted above another. They're all equal. They all have the same knowledge. They're all commissioned to do the same thing, and they all sacrificed in order to get that message to their people. Moses was banished, and when he came back, he wasn't well liked. Okay, Jesus was crucified. Muhammad spent most of his adult life out in the middle of the desert, banished from Mecca. They were hoping they would kill him by starving him to death and keeping him from water. And there are hundreds and thousands, we're taught, of prophets down through the ages that we don't even know about anymore. Their names are lost to history. But God has never let us go without guidance, and indeed has always given us guidance before we even knew we needed it. Now, the third thing is that there is only one race, the human race. There is only one mankind. Okay? There's not a multiplicity of races. There's only one race. There are differences in color. Hell, there are differences in colors in dogs. There's only one dog kind. There's only one human kind. But we divide up over silly things. And then we cause conflict with each other. So God, knowing this, and knowing the age in which we lived, and knowing the things that would arise in the 20th and 21st centuries, in the century preceding them, sent a prophet. Well, actually sent two prophets, to give to man some rules and understandings that would make it possible for man to survive and not become extinct. Because we were told in our teachings by these two prophets, and particularly by one of them, that if we didn't follow the teachings he gave in the 1800s, that we were on the verge of becoming a species that was extinct. As he said, he's come to save us from the slough of impending extinction. A slough is, in the old days, in the old nations of the world, your water, when you were done with your water and everything, your sewage, was fed down a water trowel on the street, as it were, a ditch where the open sewage ran, down to wherever the sewage ran to. That was a slough. And what he said is that God had sent him to keep us from running into the slough of impending extinction. Okay? The two prophets that came, the first of those was, we believe, one named the Bob. It sounds like Bob, like Robert, the Bob. But it's a Persian Arabic word that simply means the gate. Okay, and he claimed to be a gate through which two different cycles of human history where one was ending and another was beginning. And he was the gate through which one was ending and the other was beginning. And this gate, the Bob, was a forerunner, like John the Baptist was a forerunner to Jesus, was a forerunner to the next prophet to come after him. He didn't name him right away. He said he's him whom God shall make manifest in the future. God will make it clear. He gathered in the 6 or so years that he was teaching 20,000 followers at least, because we know that many by recorded history of the Persians themselves were killed by the Persians. Okay, they were not killed nicely either. I mean, it was like what was that guy? Nero, like Nero did to the early Christians. I mean, they were brutal. They threw the Bob in prison, threw him into 2 different prisons, and then eventually took him to Tehran, and then to Tabriz. He was from Tabriz. And in Tehran, they hung him up, tied his hands together and hung him up on a nail on the city square wall. And then they brought in a firing squad. And we know these things to be facts, not because we take them as a matter of faith, but because both the French and the Russian ambassador to Iran, both of those ambassadors were present at the execution.